People think the worst part of standing guard is the standing. The heat, the boots, the weight of the bearskin pressing down on your skull until your neck aches like an old man's. That's what the tourists imagine. That's what they laugh about when they try to make you blink. It isn't the standing. The worst part is the year I'm about to tell you about. Because that year, I learned that a man can be terrified down to the soles of his feet and still not move a single muscle, and nobody watching will ever know. I won't tell you my full name. Some of the lads I served with are still alive, and a few of them never spoke about any of this, not even to their wives. But you can call me Stephen. I was 20 years old that summer. 20, and I thought I knew what fear was. I didn't, not yet. This was the early 80s, London, and if you weren't there, it's hard to make you feel what the air was like back then. There were bombs, not in films, not somewhere far away. Here, in the city we walked through every day. A bin could kill you. A parked car could kill you. A man with a coat folded over his arm could be carrying his lunch, or he could be carrying the last thing you'd ever see. We didn't talk about it much. That wasn't the way. But it was always there, sitting just behind the ribs like a second heartbeat. I was a foot guard, ceremonial mostly, to the people who watched us. Pretty soldiers in red, they'd say, like we were ornaments. They didn't know that under the tunic, most of us had done the same training as any other soldier. They didn't know what we were watching for while we stared straight ahead. That summer, the threat was real and everyone knew it. There'd been attacks. Soldiers had died, men in uniform, in parks and on ordinary streets on ordinary mornings. Some of them were musicians, bandsmen, lads who marched and played and meant no harm to anyone. I won't go into the details of it. It's not mine to dress up for a story. But I'll tell you this, every man on that gate carried those names somewhere inside him, even the ones who never said them out loud. So we were told again and again by the sergeants and the older hands, stay sharp, watch the crowd, watch the hands, watch the things people leave behind. And whatever you feel, you do not show it. That was the rule that nearly broke me. Let me set the scene for you properly, because the day I'm thinking of started so ordinary it was almost boring. It was July, one of those London mornings that can't decide what it wants to be. The sky was the color of dishwater early on, but by 10 the sun had pushed through, and the heat came up off the pavement in waves. You could smell the city waking up, diesel from the buses, hot tarmac, somebody's bacon from a cafe down the road, and underneath it all that green smell from the park when the wind turned. The crowds came the way they always did. They built up slow, then all at once. Tourists with cameras around their necks, families, school groups in matching caps, the teachers counting heads and losing the count, couples holding hands. Old soldiers, you could spot them, standing a bit straighter than everyone else, watching us with something soft in their eyes. And the railings, always the railings. People pressed up against them like the whole world wanted to look in. I was on duty near the gate. There were a few of us spread out, and the sentry box was close enough that I could touch it if I leaned. Behind me, the building. Above it, the flag was up, which meant Her Majesty was in residence that day. I'll leave it there. We didn't think about who was inside the way the tourists did, as a sort of fairy tale. To us, it just meant the job mattered more. It meant there was something behind us worth dying for, and we knew that, and we didn't dress it up. My mate Lewis was a few yards off. Good lad, Lewis. Older than me by a couple of years, from somewhere up north with an accent you could cut bread with. He had this way of staying dead still, and yet somehow letting you know he was laughing inside. We weren't supposed to talk on duty. We found ways. That morning he'd caught my eye for half a second when a pigeon landed square on the busby of a guard further down the line and just sat there, like it owned the place. The guard didn't move. Couldn't. The pigeon rode him for a full minute while the crowd took photographs and giggled. Lewis's eyes flicked to mine, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep my face stone. That's how the day started. A pigeon, a joke we couldn't tell. I want you to hold on to that. Because in a few hours, the same stillness that turned a man into a perch for a bird was going to be the only thing standing between a lot of people and something terrible. And nobody in that crowd would understand what they were watching. The shift wore on. The heat got worse. Sweat ran down my spine under the tunic, and I let it. You learn to let it. You learn to live inside the discomfort and pretend it isn't yours. A little girl came up to the railings around midday. I noticed her because she wasn't loud the way some children are. She was small, maybe 5 or 6, with a yellow ribbon in her hair that had come half undone. She had her face pressed between the bars, just staring at me. Not laughing, not trying to make me move. Just looking, the way children look at things they don't fully understand yet. Her mum was behind her, a young woman with a camera and a tired smile, and a baby on her hip wrapped up far too warm for the weather. The mum kept saying, "Katie, come on, love, don't wander." But Katie wasn't listening. Katie had found a soldier who looked like he'd stepped out of a storybook, and she wasn't going anywhere. I shouldn't have noticed her so much. We're trained to take in everyone and fix on no one. But there was something about that little face. She reminded me of my sister at that age. And for a moment, just a moment, I let myself be a person instead of a statue. That was a mistake, in a way, because for the rest of what happened, I couldn't stop seeing her. It was a bit after 1 o'clock when the feeling started. I can't tell you exactly what it was at first, that's the honest truth. It wasn't a sight or a sound. It was the way the back of my neck went cold even in that heat. Soldiers talk about it. The older men called it different things. A prickle, a draft. The sense that something in the world has shifted half an inch out of place. I scanned the crowd the way I'd been taught, slow and steady, not letting my eyes lock onto anything. Faces, hands, bags, faces, hands, bags. And then I saw it. There was a man near the edge of the crowd off to my left, maybe 30 feet away. He was ordinary looking. That was the thing. He wasn't wild-eyed or sweating or doing anything you could point at. He was wearing a dark jacket, too heavy for the day. That part snagged at me, and he was standing slightly apart from everyone else, not pressed to the railings like the rest, hanging back, near a bin. And he had a bag. A holdall, dark green, I think, though my memories painted over the color 100 times since. It was sitting on the ground by his feet, and he wasn't holding it. He had his hands in his jacket pockets, and he was looking around. Not at us, not at the building. He was looking at the crowd, counting it almost. The way you'd count people if you were measuring something. I felt my mouth go dry. Now I want to be fair to you and to myself. 99 times out of 100, a man with a bag is just a man with a bag. London is full of them. We saw 1,000 bags a day. If we panicked over everyone, we'd have done nothing else. You learn to weigh it. The way the person holds it, whether they leave it, whether they look like they're waiting for someone or waiting for nobody. This man wasn't waiting for anyone. There was no friend coming back, no queue he was in. He was alone and apart, and the bag was on the ground, and he kept doing this thing. He kept checking his watch. I want you to understand what that did to me standing there, because everything in my body was screaming to do something, to shout, to run, to grab that little girl with the yellow ribbon and her mum and the baby and pull them away from the railings. Every nerve I had was a wire pulled tight. And I couldn't move. That was the rule, the unforgiving iron rule. A sentry on his post does not break, not for heat, not for insult, not for fear. There was a chain of how things were done, and a single guardsman deciding on his own to bolt from his post in front of a crowd of hundreds could cause the very panic that gets people crushed and killed. A stampede at those railings would have been its own disaster. I knew that. They drilled it into us. But knowing it and standing there with my heart going like a hammer were two completely different things. I did the one thing I could do without breaking. I shifted my eyes to Lewis. He was already looking. That's the thing about men you've trained beside, you don't always need words. His face was as still as mine, carved out of the same stone, but his eyes met mine and held, and then flicked, very deliberately, toward the man with the bag. He'd seen it too. And in that one shared look, with neither of us moving so much as a finger, we both understood the same thing at the same time. This was real. I need you to picture exactly where everyone was, because in the next few minutes that's all that mattered. Inches mattered. Seconds mattered. The man in the dark jacket was off to my left, by the bin near the back edge of the crowd. The bag was at his feet. Between him and me were maybe 40, 50 people, packed 3 and 4 deep against the railings. And right there in the middle of them, close to the front, was the little girl with the yellow ribbon. Katie, her mum, the baby. If something happened, they were the closest to it. They were the ones who wouldn't have a chance. I keep telling you I couldn't move, and that's true, but I need you to understand what was happening inside the stillness. From the outside, I was exactly what I'd always been. Red tunic, tall hat, eyes front. A man could have walked past me and seen nothing but a soldier doing his duty in the heat. Inside, I was running calculations a 20-year-old should never have to run. How far could I get if it went off? Who could I reach? Whether reaching anyone would do any good at all, or just leave 2 of us instead of 1. The cold, ugly arithmetic of it. And underneath all that, one stupid, human thought that wouldn't go away: please, not the little one. Please, not her. There was a procedure for this. There always was. The trouble was that procedures take time, and I had no way of knowing how much time we had. I'll tell you what I did, and I'll tell you it the way it happened, not the way it would look good. I caught the eye of the sentry nearest the box. He was a steadier hand than me, older, and he'd clocked Lewis and me doing our silent talking. Soldiers notice. A change in another man's stillness is louder than a shout when you've learned to read it. There was a word we could use, a way of passing a warning up the chain without a crowd ever hearing it, without a single tourist's camera catching anything but soldiers standing about. I won't lay out the exact method here, partly because it's not mine to hand around and partly because the details have changed 100 times since those days. But there was a way, and it began to move. What I will tell you is how slow it felt. The word had to go from a man who couldn't leave his post to a man who could, to the people inside who could actually do something. It was a chain of stillness, passing a scream from one frozen man to the next, and from the railings you'd have seen nothing at all. I kept my eyes on the man with the bag. He checked his watch again. And then he did something that turned my blood to ice water. He looked down at the bag, just once. A quick glance, the kind you give something you're about to leave behind. The kind of glance a man gives a thing he doesn't intend to pick up again. Then he took a step back, away from it. That's when I knew, not feared, knew. A man does not leave a heavy bag on the ground in the middle of a crowd and step away from it checking his watch unless that bag is the whole reason he came. Everything in me wanted to scream the word that would clear those railings. Run, move, get back. One word. It was right there in my throat. And I want you to know how close I came to letting it out, because the not letting it out was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, before or since. But I'd been taught, and the teaching held, and somewhere underneath the terror a colder part of my brain spoke up and said, if you shout, they run the wrong way. They run into each other. They run into the railings. They crush the small ones. You shout and you might kill the very child you're trying to save. So I didn't shout. Instead, I did the one thing my training and my body would still allow. When the moment came that I was given the nod, and it did come, faster than I'd feared because the men inside were better and quicker than I'd given them credit for, I moved. Not as a panicked boy, as a soldier. I came off my post. You have to understand what that meant to me at the time. Coming off post wasn't a small thing. It went against everything that had been hammered into me. But there's a difference between abandoning your duty and your duty changing in front of you. The orders had come down the chain. The decision wasn't mine alone anymore. And the moment it stopped being mine alone, the iron rule released its grip just enough. I stepped toward the crowd, not running, That was deliberate and it cost me. Every instinct wanted to sprint, but a sprinting guardsman is a starting gun for a stampede. So I walked, fast and hard and with a face like thunder, the way you'd walk to break up a fight, and I raised my voice into the parade ground tone, the one that doesn't sound frightened, only certain. The one that makes people obey before they've decided to. Move back away from the railings. Now calmly move back. I won't pretend the crowd understood. They didn't. To them it must have looked mad, a guardsman suddenly off his post, walking into them, telling them to move. A few laughed at first, thinking it was some part of the show. A man with a camera actually lifted it to take a picture of me. But there were others coming now. Lewis, the steadier man from the box. Police, they were never far in those days, even when you couldn't see them, and the system that had been waiting in the wings for exactly this kind of morning began to wake up and roll forward. I could hear it behind me, footsteps, voices, the particular sound of authority arriving. And then the part I'll never forget. The little girl, Katie. In all the shuffle and the half-confusion of a crowd being moved, she'd let go of her mum's hand. Or her mum had lost it, reaching to steady the baby. I don't know which. It happens in a second. One moment a child is holding on, and the next there's a gap of bodies between her and the only person in the world she trusts, and she's standing there at the railings, that yellow ribbon hanging loose, looking up at the chaos with her mouth starting to crumple. And she was the closest one to the bag. I didn't think. That's the truth of it. All the careful arithmetic, the cold calculations, all of it went out of my head in an instant. There was just a child and a thing on the ground that might end her, and the space between them and me. I went through the crowd. I'm not proud of how I shouldered grown men out of the way. I knocked a camera flying. I heard someone shout in anger. I didn't care. I got to her. I scooped her up. She weighed nothing. She was all bones and yellow ribbon and a small frightened cry, and I turned my back to the bag and I put my body between it and her without ever once deciding to do it. The body decides sometimes before the man does. I carried her back through the parting crowd. Her mum was screaming her name now, the real scream, the one a mother makes when the worst thing in the world is happening, and I found her face in the crowd and I went to it like it was the only fixed point in a spinning world. I put the child into her arms. I remember the mum's hands shaking. I remember the baby crying. I remember the little girl's wet face pressed into her mother's neck. And I remember turning around to face whatever was coming. Behind me, the crowd was moving back properly now, herded by police and soldiers, the laughter all gone, replaced by that low, frightened murmur a crowd makes when it finally understands. The man in the dark jacket, I looked for him. I'll be honest. I wanted to find him. I don't know what I'd have done. He was gone. That's the part the films always get wrong. They want a villain you can point at, a chase, a fight. Real life isn't tidy like that. By the time the crowd had cleared enough to see, the man who'd left the bag had melted away into the streets the way those men always did, the way they were trained to. There was just the bag, sitting alone on the ground in a wide, empty circle of cleared pavement, with everyone pulled back and the sun beating down on it and nobody breathing. What happens next isn't dramatic in the way you'd expect. That surprised me at the time. I'd braced for an explosion. Every cell in my body was waiting for the world to turn white and loud. Instead, there was waiting. They cleared the area properly. Wide. Police took over, the ones whose whole job was exactly this. We were moved back with everyone else, and that was a strange feeling too, to go from being the still point everyone stared at, to being just another body being told where to stand. The crowd that had pressed so eagerly against those railings now couldn't get away fast enough. I stood at the edge of it with Lewis. We didn't say anything for a while. There wasn't anything to say that the silence wasn't already saying for us. My hands had started shaking. Only then, once it was out of them, once there was nothing left to do. The body's funny like that. It holds it all in while it's needed and then hands you the bill afterward. "You all right?" Lewis said eventually, quiet, out of the side of his mouth. "No," I said, which was the truth, and we both let it stand. The men whose job it was did their job. I'm not going to dress up the technical end of it for you, because I didn't understand most of it and I won't pretend I did. What I'll tell you is that after a long time it felt like hours. It might have been less. The word came back down the line. It was real, or real enough that nobody who looked at it doubted what it was meant to be. Whatever it was meant to do, it didn't get the chance. And nobody died. Let me say that again, because at the time it didn't feel like enough and it took me years to understand that it was everything. Nobody died. Not the little girl with the yellow ribbon. Not her mum. Not the baby wrapped up too warm. Not the man with the camera who'd laughed at me. Not Lewis. Not me. A morning that was built to end in a list of names ended instead with a crowd going home cross and confused and alive. Alive, all of them. Cross about it, half of them. I heard a man complaining loudly to a policeman that his whole day had been ruined, that he'd queued for an hour, that this was no way to treat tourists. He had no idea. He genuinely had no idea what he just walked away from on his own 2 legs. And I remember thinking, let him not know. Let him go home and tell his family that the changing of the guard was a shambles and the soldiers were rude. Let that be the worst thing that happened to him that day. That's what we were for. That's the thing nobody tells you about that kind of duty. The best days are the ones where the public never finds out anything was wrong at all. You don't get a medal for the bomb that doesn't go off. You don't get thanked by the people you saved, because they don't know they were ever in danger. You just go back to your post, if there's a post to go back to, and you stand there, and the next lot of tourists turn up and laugh and try to make you blink, and you let them, because that's the whole point. I did see the little girl one more time. It was as her mum was being walked away by a kind policewoman, the baby still grizzling, Katie clinging to her mum's coat. And the little one turned her head and looked back through all of it, all the uniforms and the noise, and she found me. I don't know how. Children find faces. She found mine. She didn't smile. She was too shaken for that. But she lifted one small hand. Not a wave exactly, just a hand half raised, the way you reach towards something you can't reach. And the yellow ribbon was still hanging loose in her hair, and I have never in my life wanted so badly to break the rule again, to go to a child and tell her it was all right now. It was all over, you're safe. I didn't. I stood still. I gave her the only thing I was allowed to give, which was a soldier standing steady, looking back at her, letting her see that the man in the red coat wasn't frightened of anything, even though I was, even though I'd been frightened down to the soles of my feet for the longest hour of my life. That was the lie I told her with my body, the kindest lie I've ever told. There's nothing to be scared of, little one. Look how still I am. Look how calm. She put her hand down, and then she was gone, carried off into the crowd, and I never saw her again. And I think about her more than almost anyone else from those years. I stood guard a long time after that. Many more shifts, many more bags that turned out to be lunch, many more men in heavy coats on warm days who turned out to be nothing but cold. You never stop watching. Once you've seen the one real thing in among the 1,000 false alarms, you watch everything for the rest of your life. I still do, and I left that life a very long time ago. I'll catch myself in a railway station even now, clocking the bags, clocking the hands, clocking who's leaving what behind. You don't lose it. It moves into you and it stays. People ask me sometimes, those who know I served, whether I was ever scared. They ask it like they expect me to say no. Like they want the storybook soldier, the one who feels nothing, the perfect still statue in the perfect red coat. And I used to give them that. I used to say, no, you don't think about it, you just do your job. Because that's what we were trained to show, and the showing becomes a habit, and the habit outlasts the war. But I'm an old man now, and I'm tired of that particular lie, even the kind ones. So here's the truth, and it's the whole reason I've told you any of this. We were scared, every one of us. The ones who said they weren't were the most scared of all. During those years, fear walked the same beat we did, every single day in the heat and the rain and the early dark. It stood beside us at the gate. It watched the crowd over our shoulders. It counted the bags right alongside us. The job was never to feel no fear. No man alive can manage that, and any man who tells you he did is telling you a story. The job was to feel all of it, every cold drop of it, the dry mouth, the hammering heart, the screaming wires under the skin, and to stand so completely still that a little girl with a yellow ribbon could look up at you and believe, for just a moment, that the world was a safe place after all. That was the fear we were never allowed to show. And God help me, we never showed it, not once.